think of anything. I am nothing. Nothing but an instrument in the service of an entity I no longer understand. I am empty. I am empty. A fleshy body containing nothingness and cold. A plundered sarcophagus, abandoned millennia ago, at the bottom of a forgotten crypt. I had no choice. My hands were nailed to the table. I couldn't escape. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Now you really can't get away." I answered, "That's true. This time I can't escape." So at that point, I accepted that I was going to die. I had no choice. I had to accept it. I no longer think of anything.
Hello and welcome to our Good Murderer podcast. The time has come, guys. We're here. It is the finale of the series. How are you dealing with it, Ben?
It's something to process, isn't it? It's, wow. Oof. A third of a year. It's just gone like that, hasn't it? Has it? I think it has. Yeah, what a series. One of my favourites so far. But I am petrified of what we are here to discuss today. Producer Dan, how has Series 11 been for you?
It's been bloody marvellous, really. One of our best. But I feel like I always say that at the end of the series.
That's a good sign.
It's been one of our best. I feel really good. It's gone super quick, which is sad. But to all our lovely new subscribers, followers, listeners, all of you content hungry people, thank you so much. We've seen a massive influx recently, and it's wonderful. It's brilliant. So thank you very much.
Yes, I can only echo what the boys have said. It's been a great series, and it's been lovely to see so many people enjoying the content and so many people finally discovering us this series, so that's been great as well. But yes, it is the finale, and of course we've left a massive case to discuss, one that is up there in terms of some of the darkest topics. I know we say that a lot, but it's true. It is true, and some sentences you'll hear today you've never heard before. I've never even thought that thing could happen to someone, which is, yeah, just strap in.
Yeah, Dan, I would get that protein pot down you fairly sharpish, because it's about to get extremely bleak.
I'm going to get queasy, baby.
But without further ado, Ben, what case are we covering for the series finale?
So today we're here to discuss the Ant Hill Kids, also referred to as the Doomsday Cult Murder, the case of Roch Thériault, the most brutal cult in history, Canada's most notorious cult, the murder of Solange Belair, Roch and the Ant Hill Gang, and the worst cult of all time. And they'll be repeated trigger warnings throughout this episode. Again, another warning if you are particularly squeamish. This case covers all levels of abuse. Abuse you perhaps wouldn't even believe to be possible, which I know I said something similar to that in our David Fuller episode last week, but this is just a whole new level, which is ridiculous to even say.
When it says the worst cult of all time, it doesn't just mean they're really bad at admin. They couldn't organise a meeting. It means they're the worst, as in just despicable.
Yes.
A despicable dynasty, Ben, if you will.
For sure.
But yeah, I guess, like Ben said, we'll lay all the trigger warnings out now, so we don't have to keep repeating them. If this is going to be absolutely bleak, and it covers everything you can imagine that is rank in the world. So there's your warning here. But Producer Dan, for the last time of Series 11, can you please set the scene?
We've probably got the best cult of all time.
That's true. Ours would be the Delightful Dynasty.
Yeah.
It is a special cult, isn't it? I mean, usually the early years are pretty good, and then it starts to get a bit bleak, but hopefully we don't We probably won't go bad, will we?
Power hasn't gone to the head yet. Yet.
Throughout this week's episode, your instincts will repeatedly tell you that this can't get any worse. There'll be a great number of vivid and extremely graphic descriptions of the harrowing events that transpired within the isolated commune of the Anthill Kids over a 12-year period between 1977 and 1989. The case itself stands as one of the most shocking and appalling examples of cult depravity in modern history, with the cult's eventual exposure shining a light into the darkest depths of human abuse, manipulation, torture, mutilation, and murder. Hidden deep within the Canadian wilderness, many miles away from the eyes and minds of the outside world, a community that called itself united, holy and pure, lived on a remote mountainside. As days became weeks that eventually became months and years, the location gradually transitioned into a chamber of unspeakable horrors that would only escalate over time. Men, women, children, and even newborn babies were forced to endure some of the most repulsive and inexcusable atrocities beyond the realm of human imagination. People were starved, people were humiliated, people were beaten, people were frozen, people were burned, and people were abused in all possible manners. Bones were broken, fingers and toes were crushed, skin was scarred, nails were removed, and organs were extracted. Followers were forced to torment one another, to fight one another, to scold one another, to hurt one another, to shame one another, to mutilate one another, and to force themselves onto one another. It just kept getting worse. Those who were fortunate enough to escape or survive their ordeals, having once dreamed of a peaceful, off-the-grid lifestyle, were left with emotional, psychological, and literal wounds that would simply never heal.
When did the occasional elements of physical punishment escalate into torture, mutilation, and murder? How was the cult's leader able to gain such complete psychological and physical control over his devoted followers? What warning signs, if any, were missed by local authorities and the communities that surrounded the cult in the decade that the abuse took place? And why did the followers choose to remain in the commune and even comply with many of the barbaric acts despite the constant presence of suffering?
So we're going to start by exploring Roch Thériault's background, as well as the formation of the Anthill Kids, before eventually going on to uncover the many utterly unbelievable atrocities that were committed during the cult's existence.
The Anthill Kids were founded and led by the sadistic and self-proclaimed prophet Roch Thériault. As you might have expected, we're going to refer to him as Roch throughout this episode, and I apologise in advance for any mispronunciations of either French or Canadian dialect.
Just get it right. Just do your research before you do it, and then you wouldn't get it wrong.
Just a steady mind. No.
Yes. Je m'appelle Dan.
Oh, bonjour.
Oh, oui.
No, don't do that.
Bien.
Such loud eating.
So a little bit of background on Roch. Roch was born on the 16th of May 1947 in the municipality of Saint-Epiphan, which is located in Quebec, Canada, not far from the shores of the St. Lawrence River. Roch was one of 7 children born to French-Canadian couple Hyacinthe and Pierrette Thériault. Now, Hyacinthe, Roch's father, worked as a labourer, and Pierrette, who was Roch's mother, was a homemaker. Roch was the second-born child to the family and the oldest son of the couple. The large family were described as very much working class, who often faced numerous different financial difficulties. Roch was raised in the nearby city of Thetford Mines, which holds the Latin slogan Favet Opus, meaning hard work prevails, or ardour to work. They apparently named the city after Thetford in Norfolk. So there you go, a local bit of knowledge there. And Thetford, almost kind of close to home for the poddy, almost.
Yeah.
Thetford Mines was once home to one of the world's largest asbestos mining and production centres. Hopefully they wore masks.
Actually, Ben, I actually do hope they did.
Yeah.
Otherwise that'd be very dangerous.
Seriously, yeah. Protect yourselves. From a very early age, Roch was considered clever beyond his years, which was a controversial take on Roch of the time because he did not walk until the age of 3 and he could or would not talk until the age of 6. His parents' fears of some form of mental or developmental delay were quickly put to rest, as it soon became clear, once he could talk, that he was a highly intelligent, very self-aware young boy. His neighbourhood friends recall him as being bright, outgoing, and someone who constantly seemed to enjoy learning. It's all nice so far, but trust me, that won't last.
Roch's parents were very much the yin and the yang of one another. His father was described as an incredibly strict disciplinarian who was regularly verbally and physically abusive to his wife and children, whilst his mother was described as calm and very passive, but also still relatively strict towards her children. Both parents later denied these claims made by Roch. Additionally, there were often fights between the 7 siblings, and the repercussions of this was more physical violence in the form of punishments. Unfortunately for a young Roch who was very much eager to learn as much as he possibly could, Thetford Mines only had one public school at the time, which apparently only offered classes up to the 7th grade. He and each of his siblings completed school before immediately going into work of their own as teenagers in order to support their family. Other articles online suggest that this was not the case, and that Roch actually made the very bold decision, not long after he turned 12, to drop out of school altogether, having grown tired of his public education and outgrown what they had to offer. Either way, after completing or dropping out of school, instead of going straight into work, he started teaching himself the Old Testament from the Bible and became almost instantly transfixed by what he was reading.
A scary testament.
Tends to always be, well, especially for cults, always a bit of a religious theme, isn't there? You can't just be like, oh, you really like jazz.
You like jazz?
No, we like this. Perhaps feeling inspired by some of the more vivid verses he was reading, Roch slowly started to exhibit signs of psychological issues and started to display a very volatile temper towards his family. Whilst he has accused his parents of being violent towards him, he was known to be quick to anger, prone to fits of violence, and would frequently lash out at his other younger, far smaller siblings. Whenever there were fights in the family, the children responsible, or sometimes the children who lost the fight, were forced to spend many hours outside the house, alone in the freezing cold without shelter. That is brutal.
What doesn't kill you, though?
I mean, that's not completely true.
No, I'm not.
Fascinating.
You fell off your motorbike and broke your neck, I wouldn't go, he looks stronger. Touch wood, you don't do that, by the way.
Please,
I would say that. If it happens, I'm going to go,
Yeah, it happens. That'll be the first thing you say.
what did kill you,
You
mate?
look stronger. Gains.
Here's another protein puck mug. Nah, fair.
As well as his obsession with the Bible, Roch was also a very big fan of the outdoors. He would often go on long hikes into the mountains with his father, and often go camping in the wilderness with his siblings. On one occasion, his parents claimed that Roch and some of his other brothers would play with the wild bears in the woods, and, even if one of the children got hurt whilst doing so, their father would simply pick them up and encourage them to hurt the bears back, fight them, and carrying on playing. Again, what doesn't kill you?
The bears are known. Well, not known, but
Well, no, yeah.
Timothy
They will kill you,
tread
to be
well.
fair. As he grew older, whilst many of his siblings were now at work, Roch started to shut himself away from society and repeatedly read as much as he could from his Bible each day. His family still considered him to be intelligent and full of wisdom, and it's been suggested that they may have even encouraged him to actively have aspirations of working at the local church. The Thériault family were already devoutly religious, particularly Roch's father, Hyacinth, who was a member of the, at the time, Catholic socialist group, Union des Electeurs, or Union of Electors, who were also referred to as the White Berets.
Sounds like a racist group.
It's 2 weeks in a row, isn't it? What was it? The White Foxes? Wolves. White Wolves.
White Wolves, yeah. White Wolves and
Wolves.
White Berets, I think, both of them.
The White Berets were named after their distinct mission uniform, obviously wearing white berets.
You can say it snarkily if you want, Dan. Dan said snarkily.
Obviously wearing white berets as part of it. Some parts of this particular group would later be branded as white fascists.
If your child's misbehaving, you're already a religious family, it maybe wouldn't be the most out there idea to try and push them towards the idea of becoming part of the church or being deeply instilled within religion and maybe learning to follow, maybe more toward the less of the wrath of God, more of the kind of the kind side. But it's not going to, you wouldn't have thought it'd lead to, mistreating people, and obviously what would come on to happen. Like even now with some people who are off the rails, they might join the army and get routine in their life and, they turn their life around a little bit. I could kind of see why the family would look to kind of push him that way.
Yeah, I think as well, if like all of his like younger siblings were already out working getting an income for the family, and he was there just reading the Bible every day. Maybe they're a bit like church over there, getting priests well paid, I've heard. Yeah, and you know a lot, so go on. Practice what you preach.
Yeah. Why not get paid for doing it?
Yes. Pretty penny.
Did they get paid? Did they get paid what?
That was a really bold assumption. I assume so.
They get their accommodation sorted.
In the context of the Church of England, a priest's income is typically structured as a stipend, which is an allowance covering living expenses rather than a traditional salary, with estimates for an annual stipend averaging around £22,194.
Guess, yeah, all bills included, rent, and then, as I said, you sip a bit of the communal wine. They probably have, 22 grand a year for just your expenses, so just food.
Glassdoor says actually closer to 28 grand a year. Whilst the Pope, what do you guys reckon monthly the Pope's take home is?
Yeah, that's hard then in one position, isn't it? If you're applying for that, it's unlikely. Yeah. But I don't, what's he getting a year? Probably
monthly. Let's go monthly.
Monthly allowance for him?
Yeah.
150 grand.
150,000, yeah. Okay. Good guess. Dan?
I'll say 190, 200.
So whilst the Pope is entitled to a monthly salary of $32,000, Pope Francis has chosen to renounce it, instead donating or using the money for charitable causes, the church, or placing it in a trust. 32 grand a month.
That's a lot.
His father was known to prioritise religion above all else, even above his family. Consequently, Roch started to develop a profound resentment towards the Catholic faith, owing this feeling to his father's insistence on regular mass attendance during his childhood and his mother's additional pressure to engage in regular door-to-door evangelism, sharing religious literature with local residents, who weren't always pleased to receive it. However, Roch's discontent was not just limited to the Catholic faith. He gradually grew to reject religion in general, altogether. The combination of mandatory mass and his parents' relentless distribution of white beret literature caused a build-up of deep-seated animosity towards the Catholic faith specifically and organised religion overall. He was troubled by the way that individuals seemed to completely submit to their beliefs and was particularly critical of the negative effects religion had on his family dynamics and his parents' relationship.
Yeah, I find that whole kind of thing fascinating because he still has a deep fascination with religion itself, but he's now starting to see the impact it can have on people and the way that they follow it, blindly follow religion in most cases, and this would definitely then form his later manipulation of others. So as explained, Roch's family had a strong Catholic belief system and religion was a central aspect of his upbringing. Yet, as he grew older, his relationship with faith became increasingly strained and continued to weigh heavy on his mind. And this was very much mirroring the gradual deterioration of his parents' own relationship. They would regularly, again, these are his words, but they would regularly fight in front of all the siblings and it would often become aggressive. He began to express skepticism towards religious doctrines, often directly questioning them during family dinners, which led his younger siblings to also start questioning, and this would infuriate his parents, particularly his father. Roch felt as though he had outgrown the church, just as he claimed he had outgrown his local school, and that he knew better than the church and was now eager to discover a new sense of purpose. Aside from his heavily religious upbringing, Roch had few things to complain about during his childhood. His teenage years in Thetford Mines were largely uneventful. However, as he grew older, he quickly realised that expressing dissatisfaction with his upbringing got him sympathy from fellow church members, as well as his teachers and peers. As a result, much like his family environment, Roch began to complain about virtually everything. This, together with his interest in various subjects that created an impression of high intelligence, often got him attention and praise. And he would now want more of that. From what I remember, he started to basically pretend to be interested in politics and sociology, and he viewed that as something that would impress people. I'm not sure exactly where he got that from, but he basically was already extremely intelligent, but would pretend to be interested in, I guess, high society topics, showing that he could impress other people, which basically got him attention. So he was hating the idea of religion, but also was fascinated by it, saw how that impacted other people and how he could manipulate that to get the attention on him. And yeah, it's just a really bizarre turn that it would later take. So this quest for recognition, along with the many different methods that he discovered to attain it, transformed Roch into a highly charismatic and popular young man who was an extremely good speaker. Simultaneously, he recognized that spirituality held significant appeal for many individuals in his community. So yeah, a lot of people looking to be saved. In his late teens and early 20s, Roch's behavior became increasingly erratic and concerning. He developed an addiction to alcohol, and he faced multiple arrests for various offences, including theft and firearm possession. At the age of 18, shortly after completely rejecting his Catholic upbringing, he was charged with assault and received a suspended sentence. Over time, his mental health continued to decline, leading to a growing estrangement from his family. And before he reached the age of 19, a key moment occurred in Roch's life. He claimed to have received multiple direct messages from God and began to display delusional behavior. He became convinced of his, quote, divine purpose and spiritual importance, basically laying the distorted groundwork for his eventual emergence as a cult leader.
On the 11th of November 1967, when Roch was 20 years old, he got married to a lady by the name of Francine Grenier. Francine was a young woman from a nearby town with whom his family had a close connection, and some have suggested that their union was actually somewhat arranged by the parents. Shortly after the marriage, the couple relocated to the city of Montreal, where they subsequently welcomed 2 sons over the next 3 years. Roch Sylvain, commonly known as Roch Jr., and Francois. However, similar to his own parents' relationship, their marriage was fraught with instability and violence. Roch's erratic behaviour and tendency for violence placed significant strain on their relationship, and the family often moved to different parts of town in order to evade financial hardships. Roch was reportedly so charming and personable that, often without a job or any kind of income, he managed to deceive several banks into granting him loans before quickly relocating his family. They probably did well at Northern Rock. That's probably why they shut down. During this period of his life, either due to bacterial infection or an extensive long-term use of aspirin, Roch developed multiple severe stomach ulcers to the extent that he required surgical intervention. He reluctantly scheduled himself for an operation with his local hospital. Following the surgery, once again, this is a key incident that changed his life, he experienced complications that resulted in excruciating pain. The ongoing discomfort in his digestive system made it extremely difficult for Roch to participate in any social and religious events he had scheduled, which caused him to lash out in fits of fury. The pain got so bad on one particular occasion that resulted in Roch deciding that he knew better than the doctors and that he could make the pain go away by himself. As a result, he became fascinated with medicine and started to self-educate extensively about human anatomy. He aimed to turn his suffering into motivation, learning about the various ways pain and stress could affect different parts of the body, including organs, bones, and joints. This is a really poignant note to make, and also a very eerie bit of foreshadowing.
I've got the word foreshadowing back in play, which I've struggled to do for a long time. Foreshadowing. A lot of this is foreshadowing. Welcome back. Foreshadowing.
Bingo cards, please. Towards the end of this decade, perhaps running out of different banks to get loans from, he relocated his family back to the hometown of Thetford Mines and began to refine his woodworking skills, hoping to eventually gain work as a carpenter. Who else was a carpenter? Was Joseph or Jesus?
Tommy could do a bit on ground force. Do a bit of carpentry for you.
It's Joseph, isn't it?
Jesus was a carpenter, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Tommy
Jesus
from ground force. Tommy Walsh.
2 very different people.
He's holding a drill. And
Jesus is a carpenter. As Roch approached his mid-20s, he became increasingly convinced that the world was on the brink of destruction, driven by a conflict between evil and good. He believed that the devil's arrival was imminent and that events such as the rapture, along with the second and third coming of Jesus, were only years or even months away. Consequently, in January of 1977, he converted to the Seventh-day Adventist Church for the 3rd time in his life. He finally began to embrace the church's holistic teachings, which promoted a healthy lifestyle devoid of unhealthy foods, alcohol, drugs, polygamy, and tobacco. However, he soon found himself yearning for 3 of these prohibited elements, in particular, polygamy, alcohol, and its alleged drugs.
Cocaine. Down. At around the same time, thought to be a reaction against his parents' beliefs, Roch became politically active and joined a group known as Le Club Aramis, which is essentially the French equivalent of the Shriners. This organisation has been described as a more innocent and fun-loving Freemasonry spin-off.
Sounds lovely.
Sounds fun. Roch claimed to have joined this group to use it as his own personal platform for his religious and spiritual endeavours, but he would really use it as a springboard to start his cult and practice a parody of Catholicism. As he entered his 30s, he became completely obsessed with sex and the idea of polygamy, which deeply upset his wife and his in-laws. He also was considered an alcoholic at this time.
Drinking and fucking.
Is a theme of his life.
I preach, I drink, and I fuck. Not always in that order.
Roch was using his amateur wood sculpting sales to feed his family, but he was also using it, probably more so, as an excuse for his wife to go out of Thetford Mines and travel to Quebec City on the weekends in order to engage in affairs with numerous women he had met there. Giselle Guy was one such woman. However, he would go on to have affairs with almost a dozen other women in the local area. During this time, eventually, Roch's finances gave way. He could no longer support his family, and the local credit union repossessed his Thetford Mines residence. This meant that his wife Francine washed her hands of Roch, and in 1974, she would formally request a divorce, taking her 2 boys with her.
Him saying he's going to Quebec City, selling his woodwork, it's kind of a bit of innuendo there, isn't there?
It is, yeah.
There is one there, yes.
I'm just going there and, darling, it's just my woodwork. You know what I do.
It's made Roch bawdy now.
Yeah,
And likeable, which is really bad.
Well, that's the thing. He was charming at this point, Ben.
I'm captivated.
Mm.
Were they just little, like people have like kind of wooden owls? Little sculptures like that, I imagine.
Could be, or a little really basic crucifixes.
Yeah, that would make sense. Basic crucifixes as well, not the elaborate ones.
Yeah. Or sometimes you have the little lad on there, don't you, with his hand on there?
Yes.
I was going to say, isn't a crucifix when the person's on the cross?
Probably, yeah. But isn't it, that's a weird thing in terms of iconography, you're praising the thing that the person was killed on. Deep that no one wants to even tread on that line, so just think about it.
I'll get the comments then.
Yeah. It's like if you're a big Elvis fan, just having a toilet on a necklace. In a way.
Yeah, actually.
Exactly that. Roch briefly started living with his new girlfriend, Giselle, and to make money, he began selling Adventist literature door to door. And he also started giving workshops on quitting smoking, which is a traditional practice for Adventist evangelism. He soon proved to excel at both of these roles, becoming an extremely popular speaker and ambassador for the church. The Adventist group that Roch joined started to meet in a local motel room every Saturday. Roch was, by some distance, their most devoted follower. He began following Adventist nutritional strictures and soon quit drinking as a result. In fact, his enthusiasm for God's work was so strong and so pronounced that he actually began to unsettle the other Adventists. And his boastfulness irritated those who knew of his limited education. Roch resumed his fascination with the Old Testament, particularly in strict codes of masculine authority. He was also fascinated with the apocalypse, with his message of violent retribution for sin in the end times.
That group couldn't have been a big group then if they're meeting in a motel room rather than like a lobby or a function room.
Maybe they started at a hotel and they were going to end up in holiday.
Yeah, he's unsettling, ruffling a few feathers here. His old Roch.
I think it's a bit like out of order to go like, we're annoyed by how boastful he's being because he's uneducated.
Yeah,
I think that's a bit like, all right. I mean, he can be annoying. Don't have to be because he's, but yeah, no, it's, and he's mixing and fusing different religious beliefs and putting it all together. So yeah, it's anyone who's fascinated by the apocalypse. I mean, I guess a lot of people are still fascinated by that, but it's not done in the sense of people will get their just desserts when that happens. It's more of a, if a zombie attack happened, where would you go to? I would go to a theme park and go on the top of a tool ride. Just thinking of Zombieland, literally, that's all I'm thinking of. Meanwhile, Roch's Adventist ministers began to fear that this group of disaffected youths was more attracted to Roch personally than they were to the church. As a result, he was asked to leave the church after he was warned for attempting to take over the leadership of the church. His magnetic personality and outspoken manner made others in the church uncomfortable, and so he was asked to leave. This absolutely infuriated Roch, but it motivated him to do something that he had often dreamed about doing, and finally gave him the fuel to go through with it. By the mid-1970s, Roch's strong belief that he was a God-sent saviour had grown to an unhealthy new level, and he began recruiting people to join his new religious movement. He was a charismatic speaker and a captivating man, so this came very naturally to him, and females in particular seemed to be drawn to him. With that in mind, in 1977, the Ant Hill Kids was born. This initial small group of members ranged from the age of 18 to 24 years old, and Roch himself was 30 at the time. As he continued to establish the Ant Hill Kids cult, he mainly focused on attracting vulnerable individuals who were searching for meaning and belonging in their lives, convincing them to quit their jobs and to leave their homes and families to join him.
Roch claimed that he formed the movement, as it was known, so that his followers were able to openly listen to his motivational speeches, coexist in harmony and equality, and live a life without sin and the pressures of modern-day society. It also kind of reeked of, if I can't be in this church, I'm just going to start my own. And he'd already made a lot of other high-ranking individuals quite nervous or rubbed them the wrong way, and so he's now gone off and tried to seek out as many people that were already infatuated with him, but also look for vulnerable individuals, which I really hate that element of this case, to then simply give up everything that they had going on in their lives and come to this mountaintop with him. He also had totally convinced many of the people that he had converted into his followers that the world was about to end, which became a very useful bargaining tool for Roch. His charisma, coupled with his claims of spiritual enlightenment, allowed him to exert total control over his sudden wave of new followers, and he was able to manipulate them into complete submission. And yeah, this will play a huge part in why people remained with the Ant Hill Kids. This prompted Roch to move the group from Sainte-Marie, Quebec, to a remote mountainside in Gaspe Peninsula, which was dubbed by Roch as Eternal Mountain. And the name Ant Hill Kids actually came from a moment when Roch suddenly noticed the group, quote, working together as if they were those of an ant hill, constructing a small town commune on the mountainside whilst Roch sat there watching them. Apparently, yeah, they were all at work and Roch relaxed, sat back, barely lifted a finger, and the members of his new cult set to work building an entire little town from scratch. Which I imagine if you're doing that on a mountainside, a very remote mountainside in the wilderness, that's going to be hard to get supplies
C'est difficile.
to. Très difficile.
Oui, oui.
When the Ant Hill Kids' small commune was first completed on Eternal Mountain in the jarringly named township of Hope, Quebec, Roch had 17 members in his cult, 4 men, 9 women, and 4 young children. He prohibited the group from remaining in contact with their families and with the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Basically, he said that this was against the cult's values of freedom, but he promised them that they would all be saved. Roch's fear and preachings of the end of the world grew, claiming that God had warned him that it would come in February of 1979, and he and his followers used the commune in order to prepare for it. The following months saw a steady decline in Roch's grip on reality, and he became completely convinced that the end of the world was growing near. He continued to preach to his followers that God had spoken to him and told him that he and his followers must prepare for the forthcoming end of the world. Kind of a good way to motivate someone that you are manipulating heavily. World's going to end, you might as well do it.
I'd use that as the alternative to that. I'd be like, it's in the world, I'm just going to do what I want to do.
Yeah. Put your feet up.
Yeah. I'm going to watch Home and Away. Yeah.
Boy Meets World.
Oh, fucking bad boy.
Fine!
Fine! Very niche reference.
Also, I hate the name Eternal Mountain. I'm a big fan of mountains, but I hate that name.
You love mountains.
Don't know why.
So it just sounds like a knockoff of like, it sounds like a water. You're buying water. Oh, here's an Eternal Mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds a bit fake, doesn't it?
It does. It does. For a Buxton Spring.
Like the worker ants that Roch had described, a large communal cabin was the first to be built, with members working 17-hour days to clear the land and fetch supplies from the nearby town, which was many miles away. Ooh, 17-hour days.
I'm picturing here, if you've seen The Last of Us.
Oh, I thought you were going to say ants.
Oh.
Yes, Last of Us.
I haven't.
Yeah, when toward, I'm not going to ruin it for anyone, but when they eventually find a kind of safe space toward the end, the gated community bit, kind of picturing that.
Followers Claude Ouellette and Jacques Fissette were tasked with digging a hole where the centre of the cabin would fall in order to have a well. They steadily chipped away at the ground for an entire summer before finally reaching a water source, which Roch declared a miracle. The end of the world did not come, surprisingly, in February of 1979, and this is where the first signs of doubt started to set in amongst his followers, and the physical violence, as well as the deranged control of Roch, began to take hold. When anyone dared to challenge or question Roch's wisdom, he justified his actions by stating that time on earth and in the realm of God do not run concurrently, which he argued led to a slight miscalculation.
God is running on a different time.
He works in mysterious ways.
A bad excuse, you're late for work, going, oh, I wrote that run concurrently with God, and therefore I thought I was going to be on time, but here I am. I'll still have the paycheck though, please.
During this time, food was extremely scarce for the members. They only ate the very limited number of fruit and vegetables that they had grown from their own small gardens, and other food that was brought in was heavily rationed between the cult. They quickly became malnourished and weak as a result, but they didn't dare complain. If they did, Roch would cut their rations even further. During a group breakfast in one particular winter's morning, a heavily pregnant member of the cult named Maurice Grenier ate 2 more pancakes than what had been allocated to her. Roch responded to this by punching her so severely in the side of her body that he broke 2 of her ribs, possibly causing serious damage to the growing fetus inside her. He did this in front of his entire group of followers. But terrifyingly, this would pale in comparison for what was to come over the next decade.
I mean, that is absolutely disgusting. And obviously, there are so much more things to come. But I just had a quick look at I know Quebec is a giant area, but the weather, because straight away I'm thinking if they've just quickly, not quickly, but over time built, handmade cabin in the woods, they're in the mountains as well. January and February in Quebec are constantly in the minuses, as low as minus 14 degrees.
Me and Soph went there for part of our honeymoon.
Oh.
And that was at the end of summer. And by 7 o'clock in the evening, it was brisk.
Wow.
Did the honey freeze?
Yes.
It's very cold though, very cold. So already all the other things that they are going to have to deal with, imagine the freezing cold conditions, windy as well, I imagine, up a mountainside, just like that.
Eternal.
Yeah, terrifying. So we're about to get into it. To briefly summarise, Roch was born into a strictly Catholic family where it is alleged that violence and abuse were both commonplace. He was exceedingly intelligent and charismatic, and people seemed to naturally gravitate towards him for most of his life. As he grew older, he renounced his Catholic upbringing and converted to the Seventh-day Adventist Church multiple times. However, his fractured relationship with senior members of the church, as well as his growing obsessive dependence on alcohol and sex, resulted in him wishing to form his own off-the-grid holy settlement, where he and a select few would be, quote, saved. He had also experimented with and claimed to be an expert in medicines and self-surgery, which, again, we're going to get into, owing this in part to the fact that he had a direct link to God and was one of his prophets. He moved his group into a heavily secluded spot deep within the remote Canadian wilderness. What could possibly go wrong? And it is here that we move to the timeline of the Anthill Kids.
The year of 1978. Roch, now preferring to go by the name of Moise, French for Moses, and his still devoted followers, decided to attend an Adventist retreat on Lake Rousseau in the woods of Muskoka, Ontario. Here he met Gabrielle Lavelle from Quebec and Yolande Guinibet from France, who almost immediately agreed to join the cult. The natural scenery of Lake Rousseau apparently made a huge impression on Roch. In fact, at one point during the retreat, Roch went hiking by himself and climbed up on a rocky gorge overseeing the lake. Here he said he had a vision in which the sky was lit up with a white radiance, and the voice of God told him that the peak on which Roch was about to kneel was a holy place. At this time, Roch also claimed that he received a vision predicting the precise events that would occur at the Jonestown Massacre, which would go on to occur later that year, on the 18th of November. However, he would only vocalise this vision after the event itself had occurred. Yeah, it's always a bit of a... I always think people saying they got direct line to God, it's like when your parents said, I'm going to call Santa Claus. Despite Roch's bold prediction, as we said, the supposed end of the world came and went. There was no apocalypse, there was no second and third coming, there was no battle between good and evil, and there was no rapture. This resulted in his followers doubting whether or not Roch was a true prophet. As we mentioned, Roch put this down to simple miscommunication and or miscalculation from God, and insisted that the work of the Anthill Kids must continue on regardless. the cult began selling ornaments, baked goods, vegetables and jewellery on the side of various roads across rural Canada in order to generate a meagre income for the cult. I mean, if they're lacking food, maybe keep the food. Sell the ornaments and jewellery. My advice.
You actually sound quite wise. Any direct lines?
Yeah. Time. Big time. The year of 1981, the cult becomes increasingly insular and secluded from the outside world, with members, under strict orders from Roch, swiftly cutting off contact with their families and loved ones. They spent many months and even years trying to find their loved one. Much like the Jonestown case we mentioned, they are given a very different experience to that of regular life within the Ant Hill Kids. When visitors arrived, there was harmony in the commune of the Ant Hill Kids. Roch's wives served up a banquet of natural and organic food, and the large group of children were remarkably well behaved. From the outside looking in, it appeared like a peaceful and impressive setup, a religious group living an alternative holy lifestyle. Although it was unusual perhaps, the group was God-fearing and lived off their land. And as they proclaimed to their visitors, all the members choose to live there out of their own free will. However, as soon as their guests left and their leader opened up his first bottle of booze, everything changed and everything slowly got worse for those left in the commune. They feared his violent outbursts and did whatever was necessary to try and appease him. If an individual expressed any kind of desire to leave the commune, Roch would resort to violent measures, such as striking them with a belt or a hammer, hanging them from the ceiling by their arms and legs, plucking each hair from their body one by one, or even defecating on them.
Ugh.
There's no way to discipline anyone, Ben. Even if your trousers have been misbehaving badly, you shouldn't do that.
Okay. No, that's fine. Keep that in mind.
Please.
Yes.
Please do.
Okay.
From these experiences, they knew not to try and escape, but that didn't stop everybody. The first ones had tried to run away, were quickly caught by the other followers and subsequently ordered by Roch to break their own legs with a sledgehammer. Others were made to cut themselves with knives, and one man was forced to chop off his wife's toes with an axe after she had tried to return to her family. All of that is absolutely despicable, but even just it's the fact of making the family members do it to one another as well, it's like all part of it.
This is still like very much surface level as well. It's about to get a lot deeper and a lot darker, but that is horrendous. He's obviously, I mean, they're in the commune now. They're miles away from the outside world. It's going to be hard for them to get back anyway, but he's also inflicting injuries that would make it even harder for them to, escape or attempt to escape again. And in doing this, he's scaring everyone else from even thinking about doing anything like that. So completely manipulating them whilst being physically disgusting.
The year of 1982. Despite the horrors of the previous year, the group continues to grow in numbers, attracting new followers who are lured by Roch's magnetic personality and promises of spiritual enlightenment. Most of the new followers were young, impressionable people in their early 20s with no idea what they were getting into. In order to further grow the community and still maintain the commitment of his members, Roch made the bold decision to marry and father multiple children with almost all the women in the Ant Hill Kids, resulting in over 20 offspring with 9 female members of the group. He did this despite the initially adamant protests of their partners.
I guess you could say, because it's so kind of incestuous there, you could call it the Ant Hill Kids by the time he was finished.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah.
And we will from this point onwards.
Bumping into him, like if you're being recruited by that cult as well, like he must have been fucking magnetic, because not to judge anyone by their physical appearance, but he's quite scary looking. And if he came out of the woods and said, join my cult, I am running the other way. Completely the other way, actually. Probably quite fast.
But if he promises spiritual enlightenment...
That's true, yeah, but I'm not...
I need that in my life, to be honest.
Oh.
I don't know, yeah. It's tricky, isn't it? Because, yeah, he must have been very charming and people maybe caught up in their lives unhappy. He obviously targeted the right people that he knew that weren't happy and were kind of lost, and he could offer them something in which they were missing.
As the years went by, the community had nearly reached 40 members. To represent equality and their commitment to the community, followers were forced to wear matching tunics. Roch continued to leverage his charm as a mask to cover for his increasingly violent, unpredictable behaviours, and none of the other followers dared to question or protest his actions, or even display any kind of anger or upset for any physical, mental or emotional damage they or their loved ones were regularly experiencing, due to fears for their own safety and well-being. They now felt that, if they tried to leave, they would be killed, and if they didn't adhere to Roch's rules, they would be punished. The cult quickly became an invisible prison.
which is really difficult to escape.
Yeah.
Famously, you can't see the bars.
It's like Fort Boyardee.
I'm sorry?
Fort Boyardee? Did you ever watch that? It's like a knockoff Channel 5 Crystal Maze, but it's a island prison, like Alcatraz.
Oh, no.
You never watched Fort Boyardee?
Was it invisible?
No, but an island prison, also
okay.
quite hard.
Yeah.
Notoriously.
Notoriously, yeah. Yeah. Maybe more like The Cube with Philip Schofield.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember a second there with Philip either, to be fair.
1983. As his dependence on alcohol continued to grow, Roch begins implementing even stricter rules and regulations within the cult, demanding complete obedience from his followers at all times. He demands that all couples within the cult divorce and immediately end their relationships with one another, and that from this moment onwards, all females in the cult, including young girls, engage in sexual and romantic acts with him only. Members were not allowed to speak to each other when he was not present, nor were they allowed to have sex with each other without his express permission on special occasions. The following year, in 1984, another year goes by, and once again, Roch experiments with the devotion and obedience of his followers. The cult members are subjected to increasingly harsh physical and emotional abuse, including regular beatings and cruel and unusual punishments. Roch claims that these abusive practices are, quote, necessary for spiritual purification, and that their suffering brings them closer to God. At the same time, with the cult still somehow continuing to grow, Roch makes the decision to move the Ant Hill Kids to a new settlement near Burnt River, Ontario. I mean, you'd be gutted if you were the one that dug that well out at the old settlement as well, because that took a whole summer, 17-hour days. You know,
how does a river burn?
That's a good question. Fantastic question.
It's one for the thinkers of our audience. Just sit back on that.
Maybe the sun has scorched the river, so it's dry.
Or maybe even when it's sunsets, it looks like it's burning.
Even better. That's annoying.
That's all right, mate. Hey,
Looks
give
quite
that head
nice. It looks like England. Burnt River, Ontario. Just looks like England.
Nothing wrong with that, mate.
Bloody lovely.
If you don't like it.
Lovely. 1985. 1985. The following year, Giselle Guy, who was now Roch's common law wife, becomes an accomplice in the cult's activities, aiding him in the manipulation and control of its members. It is alleged that Giselle regularly physically and sexually assaulted other female members of the cult, as well as their children, at Roch's request. Roch began to inflict various punishments on his followers that he considered to be straying, and he did this in quite a bizarre way. First of all, he would spy on them, and he would also convince other followers to become informers, claiming that, quote, God told him what they did. So basically, he couldn't have eyes on everyone at all time, but he had informers now, and he would randomly be spying on his followers in the middle of the woods.
He's basically telling me that Roch invented The Traitors, the TV show.
Yeah, I still haven't seen it, but I've heard really good things.
Well,
My parents
people
love it.
who know the reference that are listening to this, well, fuck, Nozzer again. He got that. He absolutely top bin that one. But it's wasted on you two because neither of you to watch TV.
Have you not seen it either, Dan?
Sorry. No, not me.
Oh,
Don't pay for a TV license.
He watched pedo stings. That's all he watches.
that's true. That is true.
It's true.
So yeah, with he had little birds, if it Game of Thrones, little birds, telling him what was happening all the time. Yeah,
Oh, give
basically.
us the Traitors reference. That's fair play.
But yeah, people now felt they couldn't go anywhere or do anything without Roch knowing, which was absolutely what he wanted. Sometimes he would physically beat his followers to within an inch of their lives simply for looking at him the wrong way. All of this abuse was happening in front of children and babies. We mentioned earlier the cult members that would sell vegetables, jewelry, and baked goods on the roadside. Well, any of those who returned without making an adequate number of sales were also physically punished as a result. It's just an awful place to be. And again, we're still kind of at surface level here.
1986. Despite the chaos and violence that they were often forced to witness, the cult became more organised, with members assigned specific roles and tasks within the group's hierarchy. Roch's influence over the cult members gradually intensifies, and his control becomes absolute. The cult's isolation from society deepens even further. with members now completely cut off from the outside world, and an extremely limited number of outsiders are now permitted to visit. In 1987, 10 years after the formation of the Anthill Kids, some long-standing cult members begin to actively question Roch's teachings and their purpose of the secluded life. Roch's personal life wasn't getting any better either. He was still injured from his previous self-surgeries, walked with constant pain, and it now only took a few beers for him to start preaching, start fighting, and start ordering his followers to commit completely heinous acts upon one another. Despite this, none of his followers had the nerve to try and leave the commune or get help. One day, he suddenly became enraged at a cult member, Claude Ouellette, for a reason that nobody is able to recall. As a result, he ordered him to walk around with an elastic band wrapped tightly around his scrotum. Which is people, they do to sheep, don't they? With tails. They put their little band around the tails so that eventually they just fall off. For sheep. Tight bands to kill the blood circulation so they naturally fall off.
Didn't know that.
Wow.
Sounds horrible.
Didn't know that.
I actually found a sheep's tail once in my garden. And I think a bird of prey picked it up and flew with it and it dropped it in the garden.
How do you know it's a sheep? I wouldn't even know what a
it was
sheep's tail
literally a
looks
fluffy
like.
thing with a band on it. And I was like, I thought, what else could that possibly be?
Is that good luck or not?
I think, well, it wasn't good luck for the sheep. But I think that's where that's probably come from. The idea of a tight elastic band is that thought of that killing off the old testes. Cloud was forced to keep it tightly wrapped overnight, which caused irreparable damage to his testicles, which subsequently prompted Roch to offer to operate on him. I mean, what's that between a cock and a hard place there? Cock and a rock place would have been a rock. Fuck it. Rock and a cock place.
Hard place.
Cloud was left with little to no choice, and the operation would happen either way. Roch used a razor blade to cut open Claude's scrotum and plucked out an infected testicle with his fingers.
Fucking hell.
Yeah. He then cauterized the wound with a hot piece of iron in front of his stunned followers. So Ben's just told me that means if you got an open wound, you put a hot item on it, basically like a solder and iron kind of, to solder the skin back together. After this, he bizarrely held a vote to determine whether Claude should be stoned to death for offending God. Do the vote before that. Don't do all of that and go, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So completely torture the man and then go, actually, let's do a vote. When the majority of the followers quickly voted no, Roch took up the blowtorch and threatened to open Claude's stomach with it.
Brilliant.
I'm sweating.
Yeah.
Infected testicle got me. Got me real good, actually.
Yeah. Not good. Somehow, Claude managed to get up and escape into the woods, where he stayed until Roch was sober once again. In fact, retreating into the woods for a couple of days became a common tactic for Claude, Gabrielle, Giselle, and some of the other followers. Giselle, who was once a person of power in the cult, would sometimes retreat to her father's house for a few days, until Roch would call and convince her to come back to her real family. He would then treat her nicely for a few days once she came back, but inevitably, she would be punished for running away and bringing him dishonour.
Okay. Good stuff. Is it going to get worse, Ben?
It's you next, isn't it?
Okay. The way you smiled, you had a little twinkle in your eye there.
Thank you.
Suggests it's going to get grisly. The first 2 weeks of February 1987. This fortnight is, essentially, deemed as the period in which the absolute worst behaviours of Roch's leadership occurred within the cult. Here we go. We are going to describe in detail...
Dan's going to describe in detail.
I was actually just thinking that. We are going to describe in detail some of the horrific acts he committed in these 2 weeks that would ultimately lead to his downfall. Everybody was already on edge within the commune, as Roch had been drinking for days without stopping. Roch started by launching a hunting knife at Giselle, creating a wound 3 inches deep in her thigh, which immediately began gushing blood. Roch's response was to go and get another beer and then go to sleep. When he awoke 2 hours later, a large clot had formed in Giselle's leg, which had become swollen. Roch decided to immediately operate, pressing the leg to cause the wound to reopen, repeatedly probing it with a red-hot iron file, and pouring cup after cup of boiling water directly on and into the leg. A week later, the wound, unsurprisingly, became infected. Roch decided to fill the wound with salt, olive oil, and spruce gum. After her leg had somehow healed a small amount, Giselle tried to escape again, and, after another few days away from the cult, she still made the decision later to go back to Roch.
Wow! He's looking at any excuse to try and perform a miracle surgery, isn't he? Save the day, but
Sounds like he's preparing a lamb, though, with things used olive oil, salt,
yes,
thyme or rosemary in it.
Yes.
As well as this, one evening, Roch decided to hold his blowtorch over the back of a cult member called Josie until skin started to bubble. This was, apparently, to punish her for having sympathy for Giselle. He also held the same blowtorch over the stomach of another follower named Nicole, the very same day that she'd given birth for the first time. He hit a male member of the cult called Jax in the head with a blunt axe, partially fracturing his skull, and also broke his ribs with a nearby wooden club. He punched his firstborn son, Roch Jr., in the face when he refused to wrestle his brother, Francois. He beat another young woman named Nicole when she was 3 months pregnant, causing her to miscarry. And, on another occasion, he shot a .303 caliber bullet through her shoulder. He also broke Giselle's ribs with his steel-toed boots while she was still recovering from the blood clot in her leg.
So one individual that Roch seemed to relentlessly focus his cruelties on was Cloud. Perhaps due to fearing retribution from him, he methodically sprained Cloud's toes. Another time, he used a piece of a broken bottle to slice Cloud's arm open. He pulled 11 of Cloud's teeth out with a pair of pliers during a bizarre surgery ritual, when in fact there was nothing wrong with Cloud's teeth. He also had one of his wives break both of Cloud's legs with a sledgehammer. The horrors did not stop. He squeezed a woman called Gabrielle and Giselle's nipples with vice grips until they started to bleed. He hogtied Cloud and suspended him from the ceiling for an hour, occasionally holding the blowtorch or pieces of hot coal under him. He ordered his wives to pluck Cloud's pubic hair completely bald. He routinely poured boiling water on Cloud's body, and another time, he forced an already withering and seriously injured Cloud to sit down directly on top of a lit stove. His violence was not limited to the humans in the commune. Roch also beat one of his favourite horses to death with a chain after a night of heavy drinking, and he then ordered Cloud, who was barely conscious, to burn the horse's body. His gruesome actions became even more disturbing. As food rations were running low, and even when they weren't, he regularly made his followers eat one another's excrement, as well as dead mice. He punched a lady by the name of Solange so hard in the neck that it knocked her out instantly, and she struggled to breathe for weeks afterwards. He shot a .22 caliber rifle at Cloud for looking at him the wrong way, and he forced other followers to shoot each other in the shoulder on a regular basis. He had a man named Jax repeatedly strike Gabrielle's thigh with a sledgehammer. He crushed Gabrielle's hand in a vice. He then also whipped Gabrielle directly in the eye with his belt. He stuck a hypodermic needle in her back with an unknown concoction in it and twisted the needle so hard that the tip broke off, wedged under her skin.
Fucking hell.
He burned Gabrielle's breasts and genitals with the blowtorch, and he had Jax remove half of Gabrielle's left baby finger with a pair of wire cutters. This is taking me back to the Junko Furuta episode here.
Yeah, the thing with the Junko one is she couldn't escape, and there's a whole gang doing it to her, where this is one man and doing it to multiple people. Obviously he'll have some more devoted followers who would assist, but you feel like, not to a victim blaming in any way, shape or form, but it's hard to comprehend that people could see all this going on and happening to pretty much everyone, and stand by.
I guess this is maybe as well why he's, I mean, who knows, but it seems like he's really particularly focused on this Cloud or Claude. Maybe he was one of the larger or stronger individuals that he's gradually broken down.
Yeah, as well. I mean, the excrement and the dead mice.
Yeah.
Mouse caca. Sucker.
That's a fucking stretch.
Mouse caca. Mouse caca. Misaka.
Yeah.
Yeah, doesn't work.
So as well as everything just listed, obviously he had Jax remove half of Gabrielle's left baby finger with a pair of wire cutters. He then broke Gabrielle's remaining fingers with a large wooden club. He then made her cut a hole in the ice of a pond and jump into the freezing water whilst carrying all of these injuries. He then threw a knife at a young girl called Francine, and another knife was thrown into a girl called Maurice. Once she had finally recovered from her punch to the neck, Roch broke Solange's cheekbone when she was 6 months pregnant with his child.
Very, very heavy stuff.
When you thought it couldn't get worse, over time, Roch's punishments became increasingly more disturbing and violent, including making members break their own legs with sledgehammers, break one another's legs, and forcing pregnant women and children to sit on lit stoves and shoot each other in the shoulders. A follower would sometimes casually be asked to cut off another follower's toes with wire cutters in order to prove their loyalty to Roch. The abuse was not just towards the adults, it did extend to the cult's children, many of whom were Roch's, who were physically and sexually abused, held over fires, or nailed to trees, whilst other children were encouraged to throw stones at them. One of Roch's wives made the heartbreaking decision to leave a newborn child, Elisa Lavelli, outside in the wilderness overnight to slowly freeze to death in order to keep her away from the abuse that Roch was capable of. She was just a few weeks old.
At this point, perhaps realising how far he had fallen, Roch attempted to backtrack completely to the original religious mission of the Anthill Kids commune, beginning to strongly believe in purifying his followers and ridding them of their sins, through abusive purification sessions where the members would be completely nude as he whipped and beat them. Roch still vehemently claimed to be a holy being and a prophet, and started performing entirely unnecessary amateur surgical operations on sick members to demonstrate his healing powers. These surgeries included injecting a 94% ethanol solution into stomachs or performing circumcisions on the children and adults of the group. Many of the victims simply had colds or the flu.
As if that wasn't bad enough, during one particularly strenuous day of work, despite many requests to stop for rest, Gabrielle's uterus eventually prolapsed, causing her to fall to the floor in agony. The organ itself had protruded almost 3 inches outside her vagina. Roch immediately leapt into action. Basically he saw this as an opportunity for him to perform a miracle in front of his followers. He decided to begin this miracle by physically punching Gabrielle's uterus back up into her body and then forcibly strapping a cone to her vagina in order to keep the organ in place. Although Gabrielle fled to a woman's shelter immediately after this incident, she made the decision to return to the Anthill Kids commune instead of seeing a doctor. And there's been many reasons as to why this could have been the case. There's lots of speculation out there. This could have been through fear or a lack of finance. Either way, after she returned, Roch decided that his next treatment would be to tie a piece of string around the exposed part of her uterus and suddenly and aggressively pull it as you would to remove a loose tooth. Gabrielle lived with her injuries for another year before she was eventually able to undergo a partial hysterectomy at a hospital in Utah. And this is whilst Roch and some of the other members of the cult were visiting the area. Despite social workers visiting the property multiple times over the next year and removing 17 of the children from the cult, no action was taken against Roch. And again, this could be how they were performing to visitors from outside of the cult. He was able to get away with this for so long.
That just shows his absolute perfection of power. Like you mentioned, Tom, you don't want to victim blame and be like, why didn't people just do something about it? It shows how perfect he'd managed his own horrific power over everybody.
Obviously, even with people, the social workers go in there, taking the children away because they know it's an unfit place for them to be. Nothing happening to him. I mean, obviously, the members of the cult would have been scared or still believing the Roch was, someone holy and didn't want to, go against God's will or whatever. But yeah, still the fact that people were able to go there and no action was taken is. So I'm sure he would have charmed them as well.
January 1989, so we move forward almost 2 years, and once again, another trigger warning for this particular part. When cult member Solange Belair reluctantly complained to Roch of an upset stomach, he decided that, to quickly fix this, he would perform another one of his amateur surgeries without any anesthesia. Roch orders her to be stripped naked and placed onto a table before he proceeds to violently punch her in the stomach several times. His thought process for performing a miracle is to immediately act with violence and immediately start punching. He then punched her in the stomach several times before turning her over and forcing a large plastic tube into her rectum, when he then began to perform what has been described as a crude enema, using the bizarre combination of olive oil together with molasses, forcing this concoction into her body. When this didn't work, he decided to slice her abdomen open with a knife, before proceeding to forcibly remove parts of her intestines with his bare hands. He did all of this without any anesthetic, as Solange watched on in horror and agony. Roch then ordered Gabrielle Lavelli, whom he had recently brutalized, to stitch up Solange's wounds using a needle and cotton thread, whilst ordering another female cult member to force a tube down Solange's throat and start to blow air into it, as he noticed that her breathing had started to become shallow. Unfortunately, Solange passed away the next day as a result of Roch's quote-unquote surgery, and terrifyingly, Roch did not stop there. In front of many horrified followers, he declared to have the power of resurrection. As a result, he orders part of Solange's skull to be drilled into, with the cap of her skull being completely removed. Roch then had himself and other male members of the cult ejaculate into this cavity. When Solange was not resurrected, Roch apparently sharply ordered her body to be hidden by other members of the cult, and Solange's corpse was actually buried later that night not far away from where children were playing on the Anthill Kids commune.
I mean, that just goes beyond belief.
Yeah. The thing is as well, there would have been, as you said, there would have been people regularly getting the flu, getting colds, maybe there would be some disease as well at some point, getting unwell, getting injured working. They would have been terrified to say anything when they were genuinely unwell, because they knew if they said anything, they're probably going to get laid out on a table and have some sort of bizarre, morbid surgery performed on them unnecessarily by this fucking maniac.
I don't know if this is an ignorant question, but like, obviously people are terrified and scared, like you just said, Ben, to do anything. But is there an element of just, without wanting to sound harsh about it, just complete brainwashing, that these people are actually thinking, this is part of my journey, this is what Roch wants, so in a weird way they derive that kind of sort of pleasure from it, of being involved in this community? Or do you think it's just complete, just utter, I'm not going to do anything out of line here?
The case that's randomly come to mind, and it's a very different case, but the Stanford prison experiments and how quickly the guys that got given the responsibility of guards, how quickly that power and control became just a normal thing to them. So there were obviously other members of the cult that were complicit in carrying out these activities on Roch's orders, and maybe over time this just became somehow normal to them. I mean,
I don't know if it would become normal, because they're putting on acts whenever people come to the commune. I get it though. Yeah, I think it is fear, and it's fear of like, it's better to be on the side of his side and just agree with what he's saying, so none of this will happen to you, rather than an uprising against him, which that's the bit I can't really comprehend. But at the same time, obviously not being in that situation, it's very hard. Is it easy to sit here and say, oh well, just do that? But it's beyond.
February 6th, 1989. The cult's practices were exposed when one member, Gabrielle Lavelli, escaped and contacted the authorities. The police raid the cult's compound and arrest Roch. Inside the compound, authorities find evidence of severe abuse, torture, mutilation and murder. Roch is charged with numerous counts of assault, torture and murder. A little note on Gabrielle's story, and once again, another trigger warning. Gabrielle underwent especially brutal treatment at the Ontario commune during the late 1980s. As a result of her attempts to escape and alleged disloyalty, Roch ensured that she suffered welding torch burns to her genitals, a hypodermic needle being stabbed into her so hard that it broke off in her back, and also forcibly removed 8 of her teeth. Despite this, Gabrielle continued to attempt to escape from the commune. Once again, she would be captured by other cult members and returned to Roch. This time, as punishment, he cut off parts of her breast and smashed the side of her head in with the blunt side of an axe. As well as this, he removed one of her fingers with wire cutters, pinned her hand to a wooden table with a hunting knife, and then used a cleaver to fully amputate one of her arms. Despite all of this, she was able to eventually escape, where she went straight to the police and social services. Georgia Brown and Paula Jackson are the names of whom many regard as absolute angels in the form of social workers, who were responsible for bringing to light the horrific crimes committed against the children and was an important contributor to getting Roch thrown in prison. A quite upsetting note on Georgia: she would later take her own life after being unable to live with the horrors she witnessed throughout her investigation into the Anthill Kids.
So yeah, these two social workers basically, as well as Gabrielle being able to escape, they didn't want to basically alert Roch straight away that there was likely police coming his way and there's a chance he was going to get arrested. They had to do I guess, not pretend visits, but preparatory visits where they were pretending it was just a regular, we're popping in just to check the children are okay. They're making notes of everything, making a list of, number of children still present, number of adults.
Just kind of investigating and...
Yeah, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but there was a period of months where they'd just do investigative visits, not to alert Roch that there was potential police coming his way. And over this time, they were able to gather loads of evidence to build their case against him. And then basically they got enough evidence to be able to raid the compound. Really tragic element, as Dan said, is that Georgia would go on to take her own life. So we move forward to the year 1993. Roch Thériault is found guilty of murder and multiple counts of assault during his trial. As a result, he is sentenced to life in prison for his crimes. Over the next decades, members of the Anthill Kids would go their separate ways and try to restore some form of normality to their lives. Hundreds were impacted by the trauma inflicted upon them. Roch, meanwhile, tried to maintain notoriety by selling his artwork online via the website murderauction.com. On February the 26th, 2011, Roch is found dead in his prison cell, having initially declared to have died of natural causes at the age of 63. But there was much more to this story. Roch was found dead near his cell at Dorchester Penitentiary. His death is believed to have been the result of an altercation with his cellmate Matthew Gerard MacDonald. Now, his cellmate Matthew MacDonald was a 60-year-old convicted murderer who was charged with the eventual killing of Roch. MacDonald pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison, having already been serving a life sentence for a previous murder charge. MacDonald allegedly had stabbed Roch in the neck with a shiv and slammed his head against the concrete multiple times before walking to the guard station, handing them the weapon and proclaiming, "That piece of shit is down on the range. Here's the knife. I've sliced him up." And yeah, there are a lot of people celebrating Matthew MacDonald online.
Rightfully so, man.
And rightfully so. In 2002, the Canadian thriller drama film Savage Messiah was released. It stars actor and comedian Luke Picard as Roch and Polly Walker as Paula Jackson, the social worker who ultimately and very bravely shed the light on the long-standing depravities of the Anthill Kids. Currently holds a 6.3 out of 10 on IMDb and is 66% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. There's a lot of stills. I haven't seen the film, but there's a lot of stills on it, and it makes it look like it's quite strange looking. They've cast it quite well, but it looks like it could also be some weird comedy film. It's a bit odd, but it does bring to life. There's obviously not a great deal of photos from this case, but it does kind of bring to life what the cult commune looked like. Along with Clifford Olson, the Beast of British Columbia, which is a case we've covered on our website, Robert Picton, the Pig Farmer Killer, which is a case we've covered previously on the main channel, and Paul Bernardo, the Ken and Barbie Killers, also covered on the main channel. Roch Thériault is long considered one of Canada's most notorious and evil criminals, and you can completely see why. That was disgusting, and yeah, his victims are still left to deal with the trauma inflicted on them.
So that is the case of the Anthill Kids. Yeah, particularly brutal one. Hopefully our warnings did warn anyone away who, wasn't ready for that. And even if you think you have a hard stomach, I think still all of that would hit you in a different kind of way. It's some of the bleaker stuff we've done. Dan just put some up to that.
No.
I don't think he meant to. Yeah, but particularly, troubling one, a hard one to research. Very, very dark details on there. I can completely see, and I'm sure you guys can understand why we put the darkest cult, or the most brutal cult, just because, yeah, it is absolutely next level what was to go on there. Now, obviously, this is the finale. I want to say a quick thank you to Ben Bonsey, our lovely editor, for all the hard work he does. He does all the visuals. Big shout out to him. Ben Aitken, who does all our thumbnails. Big shout out to him. He's absolutely smashed it. Ollie Jones, who works on the edits for our minisodes over on the website, and to Chloe Markey, who also does some additional research for us. Big shout out to them. Without them, this wouldn't be possible.
Definitely, yeah. Another series in the can. We're going to go away now and get ready for Series 12, which we can't wait for. In the meantime, we'll still be posting weekly episodes. If you can't wait, we'll probably go away for maybe a couple months to get the new series ready, but we will still be releasing weekly episodes over on our website, which you can access via icmap.co.uk or via Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Special shout out as well, Sam Lance made our little video introduction for the YouTube episodes of the podcast as well. So nice one to Sam. But yeah, a massive thank you as well to the boys, Tom and Dan, and a massive thank you for everyone that has supported the podcast over the years, or who is a new listener or viewer. We appreciate you so much, and we look forward to delivering more episodes for you in the future. And yeah, we'll be back very, very soon.
What a finish. What an absolute horrible finish, to be honest with you boys. But let me just say, well done, Tom and Ben. You boys have smashed it yet again this series. And just echoing Ben, thank you to the watchers, the listeners, the followers, the likers, the commenters, the subscribers. We couldn't do it without you. It's been yet another awesome series. A lot of growth happening, not just in my pants. But thank you very much. You're all so lovely, and we couldn't do this without you.
Yes, totally agree. Well done, lads. And yeah, obviously, big thank you to all the audience at home. Very much, we couldn't do this without you. And it always, I was to pinch myself when looking at the analytics of who's listening, how many people are listening, and all the lovely comments. It's crazy to think where we've come from and where we are now, and where hopefully we're going to go. So thank you so much. Until next time, guys. Like we always say,
we say this all the time.
Keep doing what you're doing.
That's it. That's it. Start your own cult in the woods and being a complete fucking devil.
Yep.
Tie elastic bands to things that make them fall off.
Check our cult out. It's lovely.
Yeah.
Very safe as well. Inclusive.
Currently, yeah, very safe place.
No, it'll always be very.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to go to our heads.
I feel like Dan's recently got a getaway vehicle sorted out, but
yeah.
There you go. Anyway, guys, see you later. Take care. 2-pip.
Bye.